see here. All right. So the first thing I was going to say is the crisp getting started guide pull request. Sebastian made some, I'm going to say, express some preferences about not pulling the Ceph package, or not pulling the Ceph software directly, but instead going through the package managers. And Josh engaged in, let's call it, discussion with him about it. And like most information development, it doesn't quite feel acrimonious, but it's sort of close. So it's fine. It's just the nature of people having their preferred ways of doing things. Um, let's see. Placement group repair, which is, I assume, why David's here. I'm going to give the next 3 hours to this. Like, I'm not. I don't mean we're not going to be here for 3 hours in this meeting, but like, my afternoon is going to be about. Maybe we won't get everything about placement group repair in the docs, but I'm gonna try to put this thing to bed so that you're satisfied, and so that we cover, at least we mention all the stuff you want to mention. So let's see, that's the placement group thing. Do you have anything to say about that? Or?
Well, there was one thing I didn't put in the comments, which is sort of an overall thing, is sometimes, so when we're dealing with an inconsistent placement group, a lot of the discussion is about specific inconsistent objects that you're dealing with, like, why that particular object is inconsistent. A different object could be inconsistent in a different way, but if there's one or more, then obviously the placement group is marked inconsistent if one or more objects are inconsistent. In your text, sometimes you mention placement group inconsistency in a context where, to me, it sounds like you should have been we're kind of talking about the objects.
It sounds like I'm talking about the placement groups, but we need to be talking about the objects within the placement groups. Do I understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
In most contexts, it's probably the objects, except in the overall, we have an inconsistent placement group, so then we want to look at what's going on with the specific objects that are inconsistent.
Okay, so let me see if I understand this. And the way that I'm going to say it, it's going to sound like I'm stupider than I actually am, but I'm going to deliberately say it in this dumb way. So a placement group is marked inconsistent when objects within it are inconsistent. So you can speak of a placement group being inconsistent, but what that really means is that there are objects in the placement group that are inconsistent. Do I have that right?
Yes, but that's actually only 99% correct.
What's the 1%?
I just remembered that, yes, there are stats as to how many objects and how many bytes. So there's only one thing that can make a placement group inconsistent when there are no specific objects inconsistent. So if you wanted to talk about that at some point, yes, you can talk about that. And that is the only case. So like if there's one object in a placement group, and the placement group thinks there's supposed to be two, then only in that case can you say that the placement group is inconsistent and there isn't any specific object to point to. It's just the counts. It's just the stats.
If the count is off, then the placement group itself is inconsistent, even though the objects are consistent.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, so let me write that down. If count is off. Sorry, I write everything down in ink and it slows things down, but it also means that I have a better understanding of it. Count of objects is wrong.
Well, there's multiple counts, so there's various
Okay,
counts,
so we can
including
say
how
like
many
it.
objects. It's the
So
stats. I
it's
think it calls it stat mismatch.
okay. I'll write stat mismatch instead. Stat mismatch. Um, when again, I know this is dumb, but that's the nature of tech writing questions. When we say stat mismatch, we mean that the current stats are not consistent with what have come before. Is that right?
No, with React, like after you've scrubbed, you've developed the actual stats because you've looked at every object, how long it is, how big it is, um, all that information. You actually know exactly how the stats should look because you've examined the whole consistence, the whole PG. So then the recorded stats are what should have been continuously maintained in a correct state. And if they
Uh-huh.
don't match, then we know they're wrong. We know, well, I mean, obviously somebody could have blown away an object, right? I mean, it is possible that, yeah, like an object was blown away and now we don't count it and now the stats are off. But we really have no way to know that it's anything other than just the stats are off because
Right.
if it
And
wasn't there when we looked, it wasn't there.
the stats that we're I I hope that this isn't gonna make you furious with me. Like we expect a certain like we expect the stats to be a certain way, the numbers to be a certain way, and that expectation is based on a previous scrub, right? That's based on the outcome of a previous scrub.
No, it's sort of continuously maintained, right? So a new object comes in and the object count goes up by one, and an object is deleted, it goes down. The bytes go up and down as you write more bytes or less bytes.
So
So
what could cause a stat mismatch? Like manual intervention?
I guess it's corruption, bug in the code that we didn't bump it right at the right time. Maybe
Okay,
even there's cases where there's like a crash and we just know we're going to have to just fix it on a scrub.
okay.
Like there's a crash and yeah, we lost keeping track of something.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much detail you need to go into other than maybe for your understanding.
Yeah,
But
that's always the problem is like the target is to write some simple sentences that can get an ignorant person to the point where they can like I don't know what do I always say here where they can be hygienic about their Ceph environment where they can make smart choices and keep things working. But I'm coming from this from a place of total ignorance, which is that's the nature of technical writing. It's just articulate ignorance. But in order to know what I need to write, I need to go from being ignorant to knowing a little bit more than I did need to know, so that then I know how little to write, which I know is more information than you need about what I do. But I think I've got it. I'll write it. You can read it, and
okay.
then I'll do this afternoon. So in the next few hours tonight, tomorrow, you can look at it in the morning or whatever later tonight if you feel masochistic, and you can tell me if it looks like it if we're getting closer.
Okay. Yeah, I might add some, I mean, you don't necessarily have to write this, but maybe I would add some text about like if you use the list inconsistent obj command and nothing comes out, yet it's telling you there's an inconsistency, then then it could be like the stat mismatch situation. That's an unfortunate, not bug, but we don't have a thing that outputs the stat inconsistency information on a scrub.
That would show up in the logs though, wouldn't it though?
Yes, it's in the logs.
Yeah.
But
So
the whole purpose of the list the whole purpose of it was to not need to look at the logs.
Yeah, but in the case where you do hit that, where that situation where you've got an inconsistency that lists inconsistent objects lists nothing, then you do need to go back at the logs to work out what's going on.
Yep.
Plus, I think when that happens, you'll get a health warrant, so you will get at least some sort of indication to go and look at the logs, right?
Well,
I mean, a lot of our tests fail.
Well, you have a
fail
PG
when we have
inconsistent.
Right. Now I'm talking about the scrub stat mismatch errors that we see in our test suites. Oftentimes I've seen that there's a health warn and that's why the PG doesn't go active clean, and then you'll have something like when Tautology goes and looks for active clean, it doesn't find it, and then it'll grep the logs and it'll tell you that there was a warning and this was the reason for the warning.
Right. I wasn't
But maybe
aware
you change
of
that behavior. I've seen that. I've seen that in the past. Maybe we changed it, but I think the moral of the story is what you said, David. We cannot really put in all the scenarios in that doc there. So as long as we are telling people that these are the broad categories of inconsistency issues that you can see, and first level of defense, second level of defense, and then you have to go and do something with the object store tool.
Would the stat mismatch show up in PG query output?
No.
So you've got to grep the logs?
Yeah,
okay, then on behalf of the ignorant, maybe I'll put a stump in there that explains how to grep the logs, because some people are going to be reading the documentation who are coming from from like a Windows server environment, and they're not used to grepping, or at least that's how it used to be. I don't know. I don't know yet who is how technically savvy our users are.
I think they're pretty savvy. But that doesn't mean, you wouldn't put a grep command.
Sure.
No. Yeah, so, Neha, we were just mentioning that because it's the only scenario where there's an inconsistent PG, but there could be no objects in particular that are in error. So most of the documentation will be about objects and about them being,
right.
And, as we saw from what he has, which is the list inconsistent OBJ commands and stuff like that. But I just wanted to have that one exception, and maybe that's important to talk about weird exceptions.
Yeah. That's a good disclaimer to put in there, I think.
Yeah, I think logically for a thing like this, you want to, what is the term I want here? You want to exhaust the problem space. You want to, even if there's only 1%, there's a case that only comes up in 1%, you still need to know about it so that you can know to rule it out, right? Okay, so anything else about the placement group repair issue, which in my experience, this is the nature of, I didn't know that we were going to be talking about placement group repair for 45 days when I saw it in a list, but there was nothing at all about it, and now there's something. So at least I think that's progress. I don't think, and when we're done with this, it won't misinform people. So I know it might be frustrating. I hope it's not too acrimonious.
You
Okay,
just
the next
throw,
thing.
yeah. I think we've beaten that topic to death, and I think we should just like merge that PR and go to the next thing. I just pasted
Well,
a tracker for as an example of what David was talking about. So you'd see something like an error like this. It says scrub stat mismatch, and it'll tell you where the mismatch is.
Tracker Ceph com issues 38555.
Yeah, but who's in cluster log?
Yeah, in cluster log, it shows up as an error.
Okay, yeah, well that's better than just having to grep the OSD log, but
Right.
does that throw? But that doesn't necessarily.
I may be wrong. There was
no.
no. Yeah, yeah. That's the. Yeah, that's the. I misspoke there, I think. But it does show up on the cluster log, and usually people keep an eye out on that. So.
I thought a PG query gave a summary of the error with the PG as well.
Not that I'm aware, but
Isn't it?
Okay, I think let's
Move on to the next thing.
bring that up when it is. Yeah, maybe if Zach, you're blocked on other things, then we should not talk about PG query in this forum. We can discuss it somewhere else. Is there anything else you have?
Yeah.
It's not to
I was
cut
just
you off,
thinking
Brad,
that
but I figured that might be a long
No,
discussion.
Well, I just figured that was easier than grabbing the logs. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not I'm not blocked on anything right now that I know of. I have to look through this. Sebastian made some requests for some changes to the getting started guide, and Josh stepped in and was like, "No, we're not trying to do that. We're trying to do." Oh man, am I still online here?
Yep.
I just received a text message from my mother, and there we go. Now the focus is. And it just grabbed the focus. So I got to look at what Sebastian asked for and then what Josh did. But that's not a block. That's just rolling the getting started guide uphill. And of course,
I saw that comment. I think Josh has some commits which he thinks if you like them, you can just pull it directly. So you can just cherry pick his comments or like commits.
Yeah, that's what I'll do. The other stuff in the agenda is I closed 174 bugs over the last 2 weeks in the Redmine tracker. These were all old. I have a handwritten record of every one of them in the stack of papers over here. The thing that I got from it that might be useful going forward, and I don't know where this exists in the docs if it does at all, is there a dev guide? Is there a developer's guide for Ceph that's like separate from all the other documentation?
There is something called developer guide somewhere in the docs.
There is one. There's also a dev section.
There is a very
So if you go to doc dev, you go to the doc directory under dev. There is developer guide.
Let's see. Docs master dev. See, forbidden. It says.
I posted the link.
Oh, is it in? Okay. Hold on. I'll have to type it into my computer. Oh, I see. Dev/developer guide. The hell? Dev. /master/dev/developer guide trailing slash. See, yeah, there's a link to the Ceph internals. We have got to make the side pane has got to be easier to navigate. And this information has to be made more discoverable. Okay, reading through this is going to take a while, so. Anyway, from closing all the trackers, a couple of years ago, there was a very ambitious developer guide outlined, and then, as is often the case with documentation projects, it was, equally enthusiastically abandoned shortly after it had been raised. So we're almost out of time. All right.
Why was it that you wanted to discuss the developer guide or the existence of one? Is there something that came up that we want to fix?
There was nothing specific that was hugely pressing, but it was just of all of the stuff that I closed, the call for a developer guide was the clearest and the most coherent thing. Like there were a lot of some of the bugs were misguided attempts to get user support or like service. Like I don't know how to configure this thing. The docs don't tell me. Somebody should tell me. Like so, many of the bugs were like that. A lot of the bugs were just for very old versions, but this was one thing that looked like it might actually be worth. Like I closed it anyway because it was it was raised in 2013, I think. So that's so long ago.
So,
We might as well deal with it.
I guess there's a little bit of an understanding difference here because this developer guide is mostly for developers who actually write code and merge code, and it tells you like what is expected if you're fixing a bug or how do you want to build stuff or how do you want to test stuff. I think what you are saying is more user guide, like how should people use it or how should people configure it, right?
No, I'm not saying that one or the other should be done. I mean, like obviously right now I'm focused on user guide stuff, but just as I was closing all of these old bugs, the most coherent thing out of the lot was a call for a developer guide. So now that I have this, I'll look at it and I'll see if this satisfies the developer guide.
Okay.
And I might go back into the Redmine tracker and change the statuses from closed to resolved with links to it, just so that there's good bookkeeping on it, so that later,
Perfect.
I or someone else doesn't come back and do the same thing again. So that's all.
Sounds good.
The other thing is, okay, so two last things, and I'll be very quick. A couple of weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago, I don't remember right now, I just happened to be on IRC one morning, and a guy named Luca Cervini from a place in Perth, which is on the western coast of Australia, for those who aren't Australian, called the Policy he was from this place called the Policy Supercomputing Center. He had a problem. They were trying to update from like Luminous to Nautilus, I think, skipping the M release. What is it called? Mollusk? I can't remember.
Mimic.
Okay, thank you. And they thought that they could skip some command, but they couldn't. So they didn't have their cluster for 96 hours or something like that. And so he desperately wanted to get an admonition into the documentation saying like, step 13, make sure to do this one before step 16. And then at step 16 to have an admonition saying, before you do step 16, make sure you've done step 13. So I was able to get that change in the docs in a little less than an hour, and he was delighted, and he was pleased that there had been a docs guy hired. So I'd like to do more of that. I told him also, I was in Australia, so he's super lucky because he could just get in touch with me during the day and get his changes in. He was, excited about that. I would like for that to be a service that's available to anybody in the world. where like they can contact me and within 24 hours I'll at least send them a message saying like I'll do this on Thursday or whatever. Um, and so this is a thing to figure out over time, but I want there to be like a docs request hotline, like one thing that I can look at so I don't have to look at the email list and comb through for requests. And the final thing is, yesterday Josh and Neha asked me to go to Cephalicon, so I'll go to Cephalicon, and that's it for me.
Cool. Got everything.
What's that?
At some point, no, I said I think we got everything that we wanted to discuss.
Hmm.
Brad, David, I think internally, once Zach is done with this PG repair stuff, I know we created an early list of things that we should fix, at least in Raiders. Maybe you should revisit that once and like identify those for him to like start squashing. But that can happen in a separate forum, I think.
Yeah. Rados is that's the next thing for me. I have a bunch of like Rados question mark type notes. I know that's you've mentioned it several times.
I know you've already been already talking to Brad about it as well. So
does anybody know how to make Zach the auto assignee for a documentation bug if it hasn't already been done? That would also be part of sort of not just the people contacting you on IRC or the hotline, would be somebody just, types up, oh, this documentation, this is missing, blah, blah, blah. It's under documentation, and then it auto assigns to you. That would be another method.
Yeah, that would be good. I don't know how to do that. I had to ask.
I know that the dashboard team has something where if you change anything in the dashboard, it requests a review from the team, the virtual team on GitHub. So I don't know if Zach, you're up for it. If anybody makes any doc change, you'll get a notification for it. But that's the best I can think of with respect to GitHub. Redmine, I have no idea.
I understand what David's asking for, and I think in theory it's good, but there's an awful lot of doc stuff that Patrick's team does, and on 2 occasions when I was newer at this, I stepped in to try to help, and he was polite, but he was like, hey, we're doing something here right now, so maybe if everything is assigned to me, I would get a bunch of stuff that's not actually going to be,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it might be. Yeah, we shouldn't do that. Because I could also imagine I could file my own doc bug to myself. I'd probably assign it to myself in that case. But I'm going to fix something with some code I'm changing.
Exactly.
I think the simplest thing is just poll for things. If Zach is just looking at the tracker or looking at the pull requests, that makes sense to him. That should do it.
I'll keep doing what I've done, which is I don't know. I think I thought of it as like cleaning out a refrigerator or something, just going through the old doc bugs and cleaning out the old ones. And once it's tidy, it'll be easier. I don't know what the solution is. It's a problem. That's the nature of problems, I guess. They stick around.
Yeah, we can discuss with real users and stuff in Cephalicon. That should be ususeful. How they want to reach out to you.
Being physically
with respect to any doc stuff.
Being physically in the same room will be helpful, and also increasing the response to, or decreasing the response time. When somebody raises an issue, if they can confidently know within 1 week's time, they will at least have an email saying, no, this is a bad idea. I think that would be. I just want to implement some basic protocols so that people feel like they're being responded to when they raise docs issues. even if it's to say no. That's all. I'm out of stuff. If you guys have stuff,
All right.
I'll listen.
No, I think good. Call it a meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks everyone.
These groups.
Okay. See ya.
All right.
Bye.
All right.